Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind, episode 49.
One thing that I've learned is that education takes many forms and is found in many different places.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Dallin Shumway. Dallin is a 17-year-old self-directed leadership education scholar living in Layton, Utah. He's the founder and director of Liber Speech and Debate, a program he's been running for his Commonwealth school for the last year and a half. Dallin is also the creator of the blog, The Thoughts and Treatise of a Teenage Philosopher, where he regularly shares his ideas with other people. Dallin's interests include speech and debate and mock trials, theater, writing, ballroom dance, and cycling. He has earned many accomplishments in competitive speech and debate and mock trial and is currently on his 4th year as a student in the Wasatch Homeschooled Debate League. Dallin is passionate about spreading his ideas for making the teenage years a meaningful one through a quality education. Well, thank you, Dallin. You sound like an amazing kid.
Thanks.
Why don't you briefly tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family and hobbies and passions that you have?
All right. Well, yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here today. Hi, I'm Dallin Shumway for all of you listeners. And like what was just shared in my bio, I live in Layton, Utah, and a big Air Force town about 30 minutes north of Salt Lake City. And I'm a self-directed scholar. I finished Thomas Jefferson Youth Certification with LEMI, or Leadership Education Mentoring Institute, back in May. And so since then, I've been in the self-directed program that LEMI has. It's called the Edison Project. It's one of their scholar projects. It's set up for students that have completed the other projects that they have prior to that, and then they get to basically build their own curriculum for the year that they take the Edison Project. They pick some goals that they want to work on and focus on those things. And yeah, that's what I've been doing for the last year. And that's encompassed a whole lot, actually, like preparing for college, studying classic literature and art and things like that, as well as running the program that was talked about in my bio, Liber Speech and Debate, at my Commonwealth school. So to really sum up me, I guess I would just say I'm a teenage boy, 17, who's working really hard to prepare his mind for what lies ahead in the way of college and career and mission and all those things. So
that's awesome. So, and what other things are you choosing to do other than the Liber Speech and Debate? If you get to kind of pick and choose your own path right now, what are some of the other things you're doing?
So I guess the other big stuff, I have a blog that I publish on regularly. That's one of the things I'm doing for my project, The Thoughts and Treatises of a Teenage Philosopher. Almost monthly, I publish a paper on there that I've written that focuses on an idea that I've had, something that I've kind of thought about for a bit and expounded on, things like that. And then I'm also, as was said previous, I'm a member of the Wasatch Homeschooled Debate League, which is a private speech and debate league for homeschoolers here along the Wasatch Front. And this is my 4th year doing that. And this is my 2nd year on the league's mock trial team, which competes against high schools in Utah in the state mock trial competition. That's really the biggest chunk of what I do for school right now is those things.
That's great. I'm going to have my son check out your blog because we actually just started one for him to help him move into his scholar phase. So definitely going to be checking that out. So do you know why your parents chose to homeschool you? I mean, you were telling me you've been homeschooled from the beginning. And what was their reasoning for doing that?
Okay, so those of you that listen to this regularly may have heard the interview with my mom that was done not long ago.
And she'll be episode 35. She'll actually be on, let's see, the date that she's posted is April 17th is when I'm going to post her. So yeah, her mom, or his mom.
All right. Yeah. So she gave some reasons in there, I'm sure. And hopefully what I say matches that based on what I've been able to pick up and observe from what she said. But as I understand it, when my mom was in junior high school, she went to American Fork Junior High in Utah Valley, and she really felt like she didn't have the best experience being involved in school there, and she wanted to be able to give her kids something different. She wished that her parents would have been able to homeschool her throughout junior high and high school, because as she got older, she started high school at American Fork High, and just really felt like not only did she not like the atmosphere around her, but that she could do a lot better if she wasn't in a system that to her felt so restrictive. So she decided then and there that she was going to homeschool her kids when she grew up. Got older, started college, met my dad, who was a graduate student at BYU. She originally intended to go on and get an MD, actually, but decided that in order for her to be an effective homeschooling mom, she would need to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. And so she finished her bachelor's degree. About that time, my oldest brother, I believe about that time, he was getting old enough that she wanted to start schooling him. So she started homeschooling with him, and she's continued to do it since then. Her philosophy on homeschooling has changed throughout those years that she's been doing that, but that's the reason why she decided to do it, and one of the reasons why she keeps homeschooling the rest of us kids as we've gotten older.
That's great. And how do you feel about that? Are you excited about being homeschooled and the opportunities that it gives to you?
Oh, yeah. I've reflected on this a lot throughout the past school year as I've studied people that were able to get an education kind of on their own without being in a formal program for it. And I really can't imagine more that I could ask for right now as a teenager than the freedom I have to explore ideas, to innovate, to study things in depth when I want to, and to be able to customize my education to my own goals and what I feel called to do later in life.
Yeah, and maybe it gives you more time to explore those interests too. You know, you're not just
Definitely.
filling requirements, you're actually thinking about what your mission wants to be. So how has your educations kind of changed over time?
When my oldest brother started being schooled by my mom, about that time, she heard Dr. Oliver DeMille speak at a conference in the Salt Lake Provo area where she lived. He introduced the philosophy of Thomas Jefferson education, which to her at first sounded, as I understand it, that it wouldn't work. And she had personal reasons for believing why that might not be the best educational philosophy. She held to that as we kids got older, and so throughout the years growing up, until I was about 8 years old, school for me was pretty standard routine, as it is for most homeschoolers, I think, that you get up in the morning and you have a checklist of things to do. You got to do like a math lesson, a reading lesson, stuff like that. And when I got that all done, I could go and play and do fun things that kids do. When I was 6 years old, almost 7, my dad had gotten a job up here as an attorney for the county that we live in, Davis County. He was a public defender, and we were living in Provo. So that he could be close to his work, we moved up here to where we live now in Layton, between an hour and a half away from Provo. And my mom found a homeschooling group to put my oldest brother in Bountiful, Utah, about 20 minutes away from us. That group, a Lemmy group, a Commonwealth school, of course, was centralized many ways on Oliver DeMille's philosophies and on leadership education. And so my mom watched as my brother went through the classes at that school over the next year and saw a change in his education and his desire to take initiative of what he was learning. And it was about at that point that she decided, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try out this idea of
like non-force
being creative
type thing.
And non-force and all that. And yeah, and that's really when things started to change. Like, I remember the year that my brother started school there, he was 12. I was 7 turning 8, and I would sit in the halls of the church where that school meets, and I would be going through boring math lessons and boring phonics lessons, and my mom wouldn't let me do anything else until I had that finished. And after that year, that all changed, and I was allowed more freedom to innovate, to explore ideas on my own. And so I did that for a few years. And then
did school become more exciting for you, do you think?
Oh, yeah.
Or was it just like, yay, I'm free and I don't have to conform to what my mom wants me to do?
No, so that's a great question to ask. So I definitely think there was a change in how school felt for me at that point. You know, I could get up in the morning and be excited for the cool book that I was going to read that day, or some piece of artwork that I was going to do. And so it definitely changed my paradigm about education and what it should look like at around that point. I got older. I turned 12. I was enrolled in the Shakespeare Conquest Project, another one of Lemmy's projects. And I was also put into another homeschooling group that's expanded since then. So I had two groups that I was involved with that I kind of experimented with that year. That was my introduction to scholar phase that year. And since then, I've learned the value that comes from reading books, from being able to study great men and women in history, and from being able to present, express my ideas, things like that. I've just gone on from there. I started the Key of Liberty class the year after that, the next one of Lemmy's project, which focuses on the founding period of the United States. At the same time I was taking Key of Liberty, I took the class called Sword of Freedom, which focuses on the Civil War. About a year after I finished that, I started Thomas Jefferson Youth Certification, and I did that for a year and a half, and then I graduated from that, and now I'm a self-directed student. And so that kind of the path I've taken, some of the changes that I've seen as I've gone through that.
That's awesome. I think as a mom, like, to think about just turning your kids loose, sometimes I hear moms like, well, they won't do math on their own, or they won't do like the really hard stuff. Do you feel like you do harder stuff than you would if you were kind of being forced to do something every day? Or what's your feeling on that?
Where I'm at now, I think I would. However, when I was younger, there still was a time when, even after my mom had decided that she was going to try out Dr. DeMille's philosophy, there still was a little element of force ingrained in there, which I'm actually grateful for. Just not too heavy, but a small amount. When I was about 11 years old, she and my dad, decided that they were going to require me to do a certain amount of math study every day, because I'd fallen behind on math in terms of where I would need to be to pass tests to get into college when I got old enough. And so I didn't like that at first, but after I got a little bit older, I could see that they were right and that I needed to be doing that work so that I could pass those tests, so that I would be able to go into college.
I think that's amazing. At 17, you recognize that they were right.
Well, I came to that realization when I was about 12, 13. So quite a few.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, I didn't just barely wake up to that like a little bit ago. Yeah. That's something that I realized quite a while back. But
you just see a lot of pushback from most teenagers, and I think it's amazing that you're like, right, you could see the wisdom in what your parents were saying.
Well, awesome. It wouldn't have been very smart for me to push back from that at that point, because I could clearly see, I get to be almost 18 and I want to start getting geared up for college, so I have to take the ACT, and I'm not at a level right now where I'll be able to attain that. So it wasn't a very difficult conclusion for me to come to at that point. But since then, my paradigm about studying mathematics has changed yet again. And now it is something that I'm able to do on my own. And it's also become something that I'm able to do because I want to. I heard a lecture by, I think it was Julie Early, who was affiliated with George Wythe University for some time. In fact, I think she still is. And my perception about mathematics kind of shifted from that, because she shared examples of great men and women, thinkers, philosophers, that really advocated the importance of knowing mathematics. Because more than teaching me how to pass a test, I realized it would teach me better ways to solve problems and things like that. And that it was something that I could enjoy doing as I built my brain in that kind of a problem-solving way. And so now I'm glad that it's something that I have the freedom to work with. I know that I wouldn't have come to that conclusion if my parents hadn't set boundaries somewhere. So I'm very glad that they did that.
Well, and I think it's awesome, listening to you. Obviously, you have decided on your own that that's an important thing. And has that changed your attitude about doing it? And it's no longer drudgery. And maybe do you feel like you've learned more since you've came to that conclusion on your own?
I definitely have. If I can wake up in the morning and think, I'm excited to do math today, which I'll admit doesn't happen all the time, but it's much better than it used to be. Then, I'm able to take in the content better, be able to remember it better. When I get into situations later on where I have to practice it, I can be more excited for it.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome. So sorry to spend so much time on that, but it's interesting hearing your side of the educational philosophy. So what do you think about socialization, and what do you think it means to socialize? I mean, that's what we hear all the time as homeschoolers, that, you're going to miss out on all these social activities. Is that true for you, or how has your...
Okay, that's a really good question to ask, and one that, especially when I was younger, I would hear from people, from adults and teenagers alike, all the time. I mean, I can see why people ask that, because so much of society is centered on teenagehood and high school and things like that. For me, first of all, I've been able to be around other students that have similar goals and desires like me, that come from similar backgrounds, through the homeschooling community, through classes that I've been in, through groups I've been involved with, through plays that I've done. I'm a big theater junkie. I've been doing plays for almost 4 years now. And that has allowed me to have a culture of friends that I would get if I went to public school, because there you're able to build a culture of friends up around you. But I think I've had some even greater advantages in that I've had the opportunity to be around people that share the same religious and political convictions that I do, and that in many respects, want to take off with their education and work hard like I do. Now, of course, not all of the peers that I have and the friends that I have are that passionate about education, but it was definitely a lot better than it would have been had my parents not decided to involve me with those other youth.
Yeah. Well, and my son said when we started with our Commonwealth school, it was like a breath of fresh air for him. 'Cause instead of talking about like football or, the kind of the gossip of the day, they were actually discussing ideas and philosophies and books and educational things that just lit his mind on fire. And he said it was just a light bulb. Is that kind of how you feel? Like just the difference between some of the kids that you do interact with? It's much more in-depth conversations.
Yeah, I definitely see that. So the Edison Project class that I'm in has 5 students. And those 5 people to me are like this really close-knit tribe that I have of people that do want to talk about that kind of stuff. And a lot of them are people that I've had right by my side all through scholar phase. There's 2 in particular that have been good friends with me, since I was 12 and a half and started taking Shakespeare Conquest. So I definitely see that as a difference between when I interact with them and when I interact with other youth, because I do interact with youth that come from a more standardized background, or youth that are homeschooled but whose parents still haven't adopted the philosophy of more free reign creativity, things like that. And I can definitely see a profound difference between the two. It doesn't stop there. I mean, even with the youth that I'm around at church, for example, there's a lot of them that are younger that I've been able to interact with. And I think that was easier to do for me, instead of just surrounding myself with my age group when it comes to the youth I'm with at church, because I've had that educational background of being around people from such a broad age range and being comfortable with interacting with them that way. And so I think it's kind of carried over to the church situation.
That's great. All right. What do you think your biggest obstacle is that you face, and what have you learned from those obstacles that you've had?
That's a good question to ask. I think that it's hard for me to pinpoint one really big obstacle, but if I had to pick one, I would pick one that had to do with my experience in scouting, which at the get-go seems like it's, completely unrelated to school. But one thing that I've learned is that education takes many forms and is found in many different places. So as a young scout, I was going through merit badge classes, getting rank advancements, and I had to do certain things that would require me to really step outside of my comfort zone. And the best example is getting the swimming merit badge, because I've grown up with a really bad fear of water. It's been something that I've struggled with for a long time. And I had a merit badge counselor for that merit badge that was just so patient with me and so willing to encourage me and work with me gently. And I was able to do things in the water that I'd been scared to death to do before, and to pass that merit badge, which made it a whole lot easier to get my Eagle Scout later on. And that experience taught me that I could do difficult things if I saw something on the other side of the wall that I wanted. Like, I knew I needed to get that merit badge because it's one of the ones that I needed to get my Eagle. And so that drove me to push through it, even though it was difficult. And so that's allowed me in other situations, academic or otherwise, where I know that what I will get from doing a certain thing will be worth it to do that thing. And so I'm able to do more difficult things because of that.
Yeah. I love how you talked about that you've recognized that you can learn, in any place, in any situation, because I don't think a lot of people realize that until they're a lot older. So that's awesome. So what are some successes that you've seen being able to be homeschooled and to have the opportunity to direct your own education?
So that's, for me, is a core of my identity, is the successes that I've been able to see in myself that have come from this kind of education. And I'll give a little bit of background by saying that until I was about 9 years old, I couldn't read fluently. Like, I could read, but I would stumble through paragraphs. It was very, very, very hard. And in my family, one of the main places where we learn how to read is family scripture study. And I still remember the day where I was reading some verse in the Bible, and I was able to get through the whole thing without having to ask for help, without stopping. And it was like a breakthrough for me to be able to do that. But I was about 8 or 9 years old when that happened. And that was, because if you're in public school system in many places, if you're like 7 years old and you're not up to being able to read basic stuff without help, then you're labeled that you're failing and that something's wrong with you. And my parents were actually very concerned that I had a learning disability. And I remember one day I spent an entire day in a building in the school district headquarters nearby where I live, where they were testing me, and not testing me with like computers and stuff, but having me do learning exercises to see if they could pinpoint if I had some kind of disability. I didn't, but it was a grave concern that my parents had. But as I got older, they started to gain more confidence in me. And the culmination for it really was last spring because of two things that happened. First one is that my mock trial team took second place for the high school division in the state of Utah.
That's pretty cool.
But in addition to that, like I said, I graduated from Thomas Jefferson Youth Certification, which is now called Quest, actually. The culmination for those things was oral arguments and speaking and stuff like that, because that's really what I've been able to get into. And these are just two examples of some success I've had in that area of speech and debate. It culminated in me giving a speech at my TJYC graduation, where I talked about the problems that I faced and how I've been able to just work hard and become somebody that is able to easily stand up in front of a group of people and speak well and speak clearly and speak persuasively. And, this was a kid that just a few years ago would have been labeled as a failure if I had been in public school because I wasn't reading. I wasn't very good at math and things like that. But for me, that's a success that I've seen. And since then, I've started a business. I run this debate program for my Commonwealth school. And when I interact with people, they're able to see that I have that element to me of hard work and being able to persuade people and things like that. So it's just cool to see how that's been able to happen when where I was at before, people would have told me that I was failing at school because I couldn't read at a certain age, or I couldn't do certain math problems at a certain age, when really what's mattered are things that I've been able to achieve. So
that's pretty awesome. And it's really neat that you recognize that, the ability to kind of be in a non-competitive situation helped, ease that and help that come faster. So that's awesome. Before we go on, let us take a minute and hear about our sponsors.
Hey fire starters, this is Mark, producer of The Luminous Mind. If you're like me, the thought of going out to the store and shopping is enough to make you want to crawl in a hole and hide. If that's you, then do your shopping online through Amazon. Just go to theluminousmind.net, click on the Amazon link, and shop away. Also, most of the books and resources that Rebecca and her guests discuss can be found on our Amazon links as well. Again, if you're like me, you have already accidentally signed up for Amazon Prime. So most of those purchases should have free shipping as well. Good luck!
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Dallin Shumway, self-directed scholar. So what are some personal habits that you have that help make you successful?
Well, to begin with, one thing that students that are trying to get into scholar phase struggle with is managing time. I've been there. It's something that I still struggle with, but a habit that I've been able to build up is planning every week and deciding what I need to do, when I'm going to do it, things like that, and then making sure that I stick to that plan, which is something that is a gradual build-up over time. I think that often 13-year-old kids that are in like Key of Liberty get discouraged because they feel like, oh, I can't manage my time. I can't get this assignment done on time, and I'm going to fail at scholar phase. But I was in that boat by consistently trying a week at a time, because I'd have school on a weekly basis for my Commonwealth. By trying a week at a time to manage my time better and better, I eventually got to a point about a year and a half ago where I could have a schedule every single week, and I can know when I was going to do things, and I could, by and large, get them done when I planned to, or at least get them done by the time they needed to be done. So that's the first habit, is being able to create that time management for yourself, which does take time to build up to doing.
I think that's awesome that you're even thinking about that, because I didn't learn time management skills until I went to college. For you as a young scholar, I think that's great practice, that's something that you realize you have to work yourself into and learn how to do.
Well, yeah, and, a really good friend of mine who I am hopefully going to try to get on this show at some point, because would have some other great things to say as well, but he always says that life is too short to do anything besides your highest priorities, which I agree with. We do have so much limited time when you think about all the stuff that our potential would allow us to do. And really, there's no other option, in my opinion, but to learn how to manage your time effectively.
Awesome.
So the second thing that I'd like to touch on that goes along with the time management aspect is that you have to be able to succeed at scholar phase. You have to be able to know how to sacrifice. And I define sacrifice personally as being able to give up something good for something better. So You have to be able to know when you need to skip out on a social activity because you have an assignment you need to take care of. And you have to know occasionally, maybe more than occasionally, you have to get up in the morning earlier than you would like to because you have to get something done. And so you have to be able to have that spirit of being able to work hard when you need to and sacrifice other things, accomplish that.
That's
now,
great.
The third thing that I need to cover, or else I'm going to discourage people from trying to do scholar phase, is that you have to have passion cultivated for what you're doing. I know that on my mom's interview, I heard a little bit of what she was saying, and she said something like, my son studies this many hours a day, and it's great because he's learning all these cool stuff, and he's enjoying it, and blah, blah, blah. But while that is true, it kind of paints a picture of scholar phase being a happy, joyful skip through La La Land, I think. if you're not careful, that's kind of the image that you can develop, is that, just get to read these cool, great works of literature all day and do other stuff like that. But while that is true at times, depending on what I'm doing, when it comes down to it, a really serious scholar phase is at times a very grueling experience. And it can be tough. It can be tough on you physically because you have to constantly work hard to get the studies and assignments done that you've given to yourself or been given. And it can be tough, like I said earlier, socially at times. And it can be really hard in all these different ways. But if you have passion for what you're doing, you can succeed at it. And when I say passion, I don't necessarily mean that you're always excited in the moment to do a math lesson or that you're always excited in the moment to get a reading assignment done. But the idea is that you have to be excited generally that you are gaining this cool knowledge and that you're preparing yourself for a mission that you'll have later in life to accomplish something good in the world. And that really is the thing that drives it. And, of course, another important way to cultivate passion is to find an academic area or niche that you enjoy, which for me, the biggest one turned out to be writing and speech and debate. Those things that I do enjoy most of the time are things that help to float the other studies that sometimes might not be so enjoyable. So those are the three things that I would throw out there. You have to be patient with yourself and learn how to master your time. You have to be able to work hard and sacrifice. And then the last one, you have to have passion for what you're doing. And those are the habits that I've been able to cultivate that really help me to do what I need to do and to be successful at what I undertake. So.
I love what you're saying because I do think that sometimes as homeschoolers we paint rose-colored glasses, and you are definitely giving us the student side of what the struggle is. And as a mom, you feel that too. But I think you just sold everybody on it because if it produces children that think like you do, then I think that most parents will put up with that. So that's awesome. So what are some benefits that you think that you've gained from homeschooling? And we talked about having a more relaxed atmosphere so that you could kind of get over your struggles of your reading and math and stuff like that. But do you have any other benefits that you think that you've gained?
Well, yeah, I think that I might have to look long term to be able to see those. But first of all, in the short term, like I said, I'm able to go in depth in certain areas, which is cool. Like I'm able to have the time to devote to writing for my blog, and I'm able to have the time to devote to studying certain scientific subjects that I've stumbled across that I want to know in greater depth. I'm able to have the time to do those things because for me, it's school. It's something that is part of my education, so it's something that I consider to be part of my schooling, and I'm able to have the time to put towards that. If I look long term, I was thinking about this not too long ago, and I'm going to get into more of my long-term goals a little later, but you have to understand that when it comes down to it, when I grow up, I want to be somebody who other people respect for his ideas and the principles that he teaches, things like that. And just by being able to study what I have at this time in life, I know that when I grow up, I am going to have the resources needed to be able to do that. Because I have a deep understanding of human nature that I've been able to gain through studying the classics and history and things like that. And I have an understanding of what you need to do when you're presenting an idea to get people to believe it. And I've learned that through debate and through writing and things like that. And so all in all, it's given me, I think, the resources that I need to, at least in part, schooling's, of course, not anywhere near done for me, but to accomplish my mission in life, I really think that I've been able to gain some invaluable tools that will contribute to that.
That's awesome. So to kind of get into your long-term goals, you talked about trying to prepare for the ACTs and stuff like that. Is college, do you think that's going to be an option for you, or what are your long-term goals?
So, yeah. College is an option. Well, it's not an option. It's my decided course of action. I want to, as a career, be a public speaker and a personal and group life coach type person. With that, I'm going to study psychology in college, and I think that I will actually like to get a license to be a professional counselor, to be a part of that big picture of being a public speaker and a personal counselor or therapist,
like
whatever
a resource for other people, like
right, yeah,
life coach.
So what I'm going for long term, and with that, I would write self-help books too, things like that. And so right now, I am focusing on within the next 6 months, about a little bit more. I'm hoping to have an ACT score of 28. That's my goal. I'm working up to that. And then I want to get accepted to BYU with some scholarships and whatnot. And from there, we'll get an undergrad in family therapy or something. And when I will go on to get a master's degree from BYU, University of Utah, something like that in psychology. That's the direction for college. So a year from now, I'm hoping to be admitted to BYU and have my scholarships and admittance and everything deferred for a couple years. And I'm going to go on an LDS mission and then come back and just dive right into it. So
that's awesome. Oh, good. Okay, so if you have a parent, I mean, obviously we've had a lot of parents sitting here listening to you. How do they start an education like this for their children? And what advice would you give them or even other teens in your situation?
Okay, so for parents, I would say don't freak out if it looks like it'd be tough to get your kid inspired, to get them working. But patiently try to find what your child is passionate about and be able to give them the freedom to explore that in a given area. Like in my case, I've been able to let the academic activities that I enjoy help me to go through the ones that I haven't enjoyed as much. But the biggest piece of advice for parents is to remember that every kid is different and every kid is going to learn differently. And your child might work better in a public school than they will in a homeschool, or vice versa. Or maybe you need to put them in a part-time private school or something like that. Because I don't think that there's a such thing as a one-size-fits-all education system, because humans are so completely different. So for parents, I think they just need to remember that. And if they feel like an at-home scholar phase isn't working for their child, maybe they need to put them in a private school where they can have that cultivated with other students, or maybe they need to put them in a public school and get them a peer group of other people that are trying to make something of their education. So that's my piece of advice for parents. Don't get caught up in the mentality that your kid has to fit a certain mold to be successful at leadership education.
That's awesome. So definitely keep school options open and just study those. That would be your advice. Yeah. Great.
Then for youth, this is what I would say to them. I would say recognize what the teenage years are there for and why we have this phase between childhood and adulthood, and to use that to your advantage. So, for example, you kind of have an image that I've seen burned into the minds of many adults that when you become a teenager, you need to start having the most fun ever and make that your top priority. Fun, parties, dates, dances, things like that.
That's funny that you put it on the parents, because that is true. I grew up in public school, and that was like, oh yeah, this is when their kids need to go out and have fun. So right. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I feel like adults encourage, and that has its place, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a second. But for youth, if your education doesn't prepare you for your purpose on earth, it has, by definition, been a failed education. Because everybody will agree with me, I think, that we educate people when they're children and through college so that they will be successful in life. How you find success changes for different people. A lot of people think that it just means you can have a job and support yourself and a family. I personally think that it goes beyond that, and it means you're able to accomplish the mission that you were born with. Hopefully anybody listening to this podcast feels the same way. If you don't think that every person was born with purpose, then you probably shouldn't be listening to this podcast, because I don't see how it could serve somebody that doesn't believe that. But if that's the case for youth, that they have a mission to accomplish through their life and education is preparing them for their life, then automatically education needs to prepare them for their mission, or it won't actually be preparing them for their life. So get a grasp of what their mission is. They don't have to know all at once. In fact, it's probably best that they don't, but they need to get a grasp of that, and they need to start moving forward, doing the things that are going to get them to that point in life where they will be prepared for their mission.
That's awesome.
And going off of that, I also going to throw this out, that you need to not be afraid to be the kid that on occasion might have to stay home from a social activity to study. or the kid that understands how the economy works and how government works and can talk about it around his peers, even if they have no clue what he's saying. And
because you don't want to be seen as the weird one, right?
Right. But in the long run, you have to remember that, and I've been able to see some of this in myself. I've been able to see that even though at times that's perceived as weird, that ultimately it's going to bring respect for myself. Whether it's when I'm an adult and I bump into kids that I know today and they see what I'm doing, or whether it's right now and their minds are mature enough to see the value in it, that it ultimately will bring respect to you if you're the kind of kid that does that. And lastly, have a blast during your teenage years. I mean, there is a spark inside each young person that drives them to do fun social things together, and I think that's good because that is something that helps to create cultures of excellence. And ultimately, that's what's going to make you feel satisfied about your teenage years, is if you did what you needed to prepare for your mission, and if you cultivated that time as a time to build friendships with other people, learn about interacting with other people, and build deep, rich relationships. So ultimately, when I say you should spend your teenage years preparing for your mission, that doesn't just mean that you do schoolwork all the time because it prepares you for your mission. It means that you put your priorities in place and make sure that you have room to have fun with your peers.
Well, and there is a thing such as networking. I mean, that's important regardless of your age. And I know people that are 50 years old that still have this idea that life is just there for them to have fun versus having a mission. I think, many times when we have a mission and a purpose to our life, we have joy in that because that is our mission. It is fun for us, but it's a different mentality, I think, than what I think I'm hearing is, teenager is somebody who shirks responsibility, but a youth is somebody who, finds their mission and their goals and works towards that. And then they do networking and they do have fun having some social interactions. Is that right? Yeah. Do you agree with that?
That's a really good way to put it. And, I think sometimes people look at me and they get the wrong picture that I live like a monk. And, if you read Shakespeare's Love Labour's Lost, you have four guys that make a pact that they're never going to talk to girls and they're not going to eat very much or sleep very much and they're just going to study all the time. And I really actually consider myself to be a pretty normal teenager on many levels. Not when it comes to taking responsibility. In that area, I do recognize that I've done better than most of my age group. But when it comes to social interaction and networking and things like that, I consider myself to be a pretty normal youth. I mean, I went on a date last Saturday and I actually went to prom at one of the local high schools last year. And so, I'm doing those fun things that our culture encourages teenagers to do. But at the same time, I've also learned that there's a lot more to these years than just that.
That's so awesome. Thank you. So do you have a favorite book or resource that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it might come as a bit of a shock to those of you that are familiar with it, but it's a book, one of the books written by American author Louis L'Amour, Education of a Wandering Man. It's a memoir that he wrote. And, it's interesting. I think when you ask that question, do you have any resources that you want to share? Most people are probably expecting something like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or a Thomas Jefferson Education, these books that are written by philosophers to focus, that have like steps and formulas to being successful. But the reason I choose Education of a Wandering Man is because Louis L'Amour's story is a powerful example of gaining an education outside of an organized and formal system for doing it, and gaining it despite circumstances that most people would have taken to mean that they weren't entitled to education. For those of you that aren't familiar with his life, Louis L'Amour, when he was a high school sophomore, dropped out of formal academic schooling. But the really funny thing is that if you read his book, he says there's 2 reasons that he did it. First of all, he was living during the Great Depression at that time. So in some ways, he needed to drop out of schooling and start working just out of economic necessity. But he also said that school was interfering with his education.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it's so cool to hear that because for many people it does. Like the example I gave with my mom, she always thought going through junior high and high school that isn't there something more than this? I wish I could be reaching to greater heights, but she felt like she couldn't. And for Louis L'Amour, he was able to break free of that system and go out and get one of the best educations that I have ever seen somebody achieve. He traveled the world, working different odd jobs here and there, and he read books. Those were like the two things that he did. If you picture a stereotypical high school dropout, you like see them working construction or flipping burgers all day, and that's all they do. But L'Amour went on to become very, very, very successful at being a writer. He's like in fact, some people would probably say he's America's #1 fiction writer, even though he dropped out of high school. He quit the formal schooling system. And so the reason why Education of a Wandering Man is that resource that I recommend is because it lights that spark of inspiration in people that, I don't have to go with the flow in order to be successful. I can do something different. And it shows that despite all odds, despite circumstances, education is still there for all of us to achieve.
That is awesome. I'll have to definitely check out that book because I have never heard that story about him. In fact, I'm looking at it on the internet right now going, I got to look at that. So what changes would you like to see in the future? What kind of footprint is Dallin going to leave on this world?
For me, I want to, for the youth that are my age and, well, just in the teenage spectrum in general, say 10 to 15 and on years from now, for those youth that are youth when I'm an adult, I want to be the leader and mentor to them that adults have been in my life to me. And that takes on different forms. That takes on teachers that I've had, mentors that I've had, adults in the homeschooling community that may never have had a formal mentoring relationship with me, but have still interacted with me and taught me. And then it also takes the form of relatives, grandparents, aunts, uncles, parents, as well as church youth leaders and, that whole spectrum. So I want to be able to help youth that are in my spot right now at this age and younger be able to give life their best shot, because that's what so many adults that I've been able to interact with have done for me. But if I kind of branch out more generally than that, I want to help people become free of things that hold them back. Like I said, I plan to become a life coach and a professional public speaker, and that's what I'm going to do. I was listening to a guy speak at a church fireside like a month ago, and he said, because he's a professional public speaker, and he said that he was at a conference with some other public speaker that was really, really popular, really well known nationwide. And this other man said to him, he said, "We have the same message. Our message is one of hope." And these two guys, one of them focuses on entrepreneurship. That's what he speaks about. And the other guy focuses on like self-help or something, which are kind of different areas. But the core of that is hope and spreading hope to other people. And so I want in my career as a speaker and as a psychologist and a life coach to be able to give people hope and to be able to help people that are held back, whether it's by addiction or mental disabilities like anxiety, depression, things like that, or even if it's just, the day-to-day things that hold most people in the world back. I want to be able to help people see beyond that and change that for themselves.
That's great. That's really great. And I think people will look at your blog, The Thoughts and Treatises. Am I saying that right? The Thoughts and Treatises of a teenage of a teenage philosopher, that they'll already gain that hope, because it's really, I'm actually looking at that too, going, this is awesome. So before we say goodbye, is there final parting words that you have, or maybe a favorite quote?
First of all, I would like to leave the web address for my blog, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's Teenage Philosopher, not philosopher, philosopher. There's no H after the P. I forgot to put it in when I was creating the URL. teenagephilosopher.blogspot.com. Go check it out. I recently put a treatise up on there just within the last month, 2 parts to it that I posted. Go check that out. I'll have another one coming by the end of March or April, and I would really like to get traffic for that, so any help would be appreciated. And if I'm going to leave some final words right here, it's live right now, and this is for youth. If you're a youth, live your life right now so that when you grow up, you will look back on a teenage past and see a wonderful time, a time when you learned what you were here on earth to do and you prepared yourself for it, and a time when you developed deep, rich relationships with people and had a good time. And if you're an adult and you feel like maybe your teenagers were lopsided and you focused too much on having fun rather than on things that mattered a little bit more, just remember that it's never too late to start preparing for what lies ahead. And if you feel like you're not in the position that you need to be to accomplish your purpose and your mission, then it's never too late to start. And that's what I would like to leave with people.
That was great. Well, thank you, Dallin. It's been so fun talking to you. Actually, we had a hard time getting together, so I'm glad that we finally had some time to listen to you because you're full of wisdom. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Dallin Shumway, a self-directed scholar, go to our show notes at theluminousmind.net. Also, be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list so you can receive our weekly audio blog, The Spark. We would love to have you join our program. Do so by going to the scheduling tab and become a fire starter today. Help support the podcast by making all your Amazon purchases through the free Amazon widget on our website, theluminousmind.net. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Google+. Get our audio content on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. Leave us a review. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.